Hello and welcome to the India Story. My name is Mohammed Saleh. And this week we're focusing on three top stories coming out of India. The Prime Minister Narendra Modi is currently on a two-day visit to France, marking the 25th anniversary of the bilateral strategic partnership between the two nations. And after the United States, it is France that has pulled out all stops and has rolled out the red carpet for the Indian Prime Minister, extending a very warm welcome for Narendra Modi. And with this, he's also now become only the second Indian leader to be welcomed as the guest of honor at the Bastille Day Parade. And adding to this honor, he was also awarded the Grand Cross of the Legion of Honor, which is the highest distinction that is bestowed by France. Now, amidst this visit, the Prime Minister also made some significant announcements during his address to the Indian diaspora. But the focus, of course, remains on the military drill deals for the 26 naval Rafale fighter jets and also the 3 Scorpion submarines, the deals of which are being struck. Now, in just a little while, we'll also be discussing the implications of this visit with the top experts. And joining us on the show from Paris will be the former Foreign Secretary Kanwal Sibal, Arun Kumar Singh, the former envoy to France, will also be joining us from New Delhi. Commodore C. Uday Bhaskar, the Director of the Society of Policy Studies, will also be a part of the discussion on this show. Meanwhile, back home in India, floods continue to wreak havoc. Thousands of people have been displaced in the national capital as Yamuna has breached a 45-year record earlier in the week. The flood-like situation in New Delhi continues to remain extremely grim, with many areas witnessing waterlogging. And parts of the national capital, such as major markets, monuments and homes, remain completely inundated, with no signs of the water receding. The floods and incessant rainfall has also battered the lives and infrastructure in states such as Himachal Pradesh, for instance, in Uttarakhand, Punjab, Haryana, etc. Himachal Pradesh remains the worst affected state, where roughly about 50 landslides and numerous flash floods have caused severe damage. And at least about 80 people have ended up losing their lives in this deluge. Now, with more prediction of rainfall in Himachal Pradesh and Uttarakhand in the coming days, the situation in the national capital is likely to get worse. But our big focus, the first story that we'll be looking at, is India's mission to the moon. On the 20th of July back in 1969, the first humans had landed on the moon. And in the same year, India's space agency ISRO in fact came up with its present form. And now 54 years later, almost to the day, ISRO has launched its third and arguably the most ambitious moon mission yet, Chandrayaan-3. The spacecraft launched from the Satish Dhawan Space Center in Sriharikota at exactly 2:35 p.m. this afternoon. It successfully took off from planet Earth and is now in orbit around the Earth in its journey to the moon. It has many critical events lined up, including the Earth-bound maneuvers, insertion into the lunar orbit, separation of the lander, a set of deboost maneuvers, and also then a very important power descent phase for the all-crucial soft landing. This mission, if it were to turn out to be successful, will prove vital for America's future lunar expeditions in 2025. But what makes Chandrayaan-3 such a significant space mission for India is because only 3 other nations before India have done this successfully. Only the United States, Russia and China have been able to soft land on the surface of the moon. The Chandrayaan-3 aims to be the first craft to land near the moon's south pole. If successful, this will mark India's entry into the super elite club of, at this moment, only 3 nations. The United States, Russia and China have done a soft landing on the moon so far. ISRO also hopes to show its end-to-end capability of launching, landing and also rowing on a heavenly body. Now, what challenges lie ahead for this mission? Will we script history with Chandrayaan-3? And what are the other significant tests and missions in ISRO's pipelines?
That's a piece of really good news that the
and to give us more details in terms of what, of course, has unfolded today and also what India, of course, is aiming for. We're being joined by Dr. Ajay Lele, who's a senior fellow at the Manohar Parrikar Institute for Defence Studies and Analysis. He's joining us live on this broadcast. Now, Dr. Lele, this is a significant moment in India's quest to become a nation that can actually soft land on the surface of the moon. Now, for people who are watching this who do not understand what a soft landing means, give us a sense of what actually entails in a soft landing on the moon and why is it so crucial?
As far as soft landing on the moon is concerned, India tried its luck in the year 2019 with a mission called Chandrayaan-2. That mission had two objectives. One was to put an orbiter into the close vicinity of the moon, that is in the lunar orbit, and other aspect was to do a soft landing on the moon. Soft landing means you send a robotic equipment on the moon surface, make it land on the moon surface, and take another equipment out of the belly of that equipment. So the mother equipment is known as a lander.
Right.
So that equipment lands on the moon surface, and the rover equipment gets out of the mother equipment and starts operating on the moon surface. As a pre-programmed equipment, it starts moving on the moon surface and starts picking up observations. At places, it can go slightly 10 centimeters deep into the moon surface and also have a look at the soil on the moon surface. There are operations which are pre-planned. So there is a mineralogical mapping which happens. There's a chemical analysis which happens. And that rover sends the messages back to the lander.
Right.
And that lander sends the messages back to the orbiter. And the messages are picked up on the Earth's ground station. So India failed to do that in the year 2019. Now India is reattempting that, and in that direction, the first step successfully has taken place today when India has launched the Chandrayaan-3 missions. It will take another 40 to 42 days to get into the orbit of the moon and subsequently get deorbited and land onto the surface of the moon as a single unit, a lander. And subsequently, the rover will get out of the belly of a lander and start undertaking observations. So it's not only lander or a rover, both the systems will start undertaking different types of observations. They have got different sensors on board, what we call as payloads.
All right, indeed. Now, Mr. Lele, what is also interesting is that India is trying to land on the south pole of the moon. Tell us, our viewers, why it is important to land on the south pole of the moon. Why is it that this particular destination was chosen and not any other destination?
As you were mentioning earlier, there are only 3 countries who have done the soft landing of the moon. So most of these soft landings on the moon have happened at an equatorial region. What happens on the surface of the moon is that you require solar energy basically to keep your systems operational. So equator is a place where you will have abundance amount of a solar energy continuously available. But as you start moving closer to the South Pole, you see South Pole could be considered at 90 degrees at the latitude of the equator, south of the equator. India is planning to land around 70 degrees of latitude towards the south. Right. Now the issue here is that you require a sunrise also, you require sun raises also. At the same time, you require certain areas where the sun is not going to reach. The reason behind this is that in the year 2008-2009, when India did its first mission to the moon, India has identified the presence of a water on the moon. Now, this presence of a water is in form of hydrogen molecules. Now, India wants to dig further deep over here. Now, since the temperatures on the moon are exorbitantly high in the morning period, hence there is no possibility of the water to stand there on the equatorial region or other region. The presence of water could be only there where there is a total shadow region. That means no sun rays are reaching over there. So these regions are close to the South Pole. There's a possibility that there could be a water available, not as a pure water what you and me drink, but in form of a frozen ice or something. So that understanding is more importantly required since India has already done a testing and found out there is a water available. So this one can say as a step 2 in that direction. And that's the reason India has decided to land onto the south pole of the closer to the south pole of the moon. It takes good amount of a technical expertise to do these types of activities also,
Absolutely.
because you require more amount of fuel to do such type of a landing. So India considers this mission not only as a technology demonstration mission, but a mission which has got both aspects. One is a technology demonstration, and other is to look for scientific endeavors and undertake some scientific experimentation.
Absolutely indeed, Dr. Lele. Do continue to stay on with us. Meanwhile, I'm told that we're also being joined by the former ISRO chairman, Dr. Madhavan Nair. He's joining us live from Trivandrum. Dr. Nair, this is a big moment for India, isn't it? We tried to soft land on the moon during the Chandrayaan-2 mission. We just very narrowly missed it. We were about 355 meters above the moon surface when we lost contact with the Chandrayaan-2 moon mission, but now we are attempting to land on the moon again. Tell us, what are the challenges that await for India, and how is it that we would want to get things right this time round?
Well, I think the last mission, I will say that by and large it went correctly up to 2 kilometers above the surface of the moon. At the time, some anomaly in the control system has taken place, which has resulted in a tumbling motion of the spacecraft, which lost its control and which was not able to effectively reduce the velocity to the low value of about less than 2 meters per second. It impacted with about, I understand, about 30 to 40 meters per second. With that velocity, the entire spacecraft would have disintegrated. The soft landing maneuver is a very complex operation where, unlike in air, once you break the Earth's orbit, the atmosphere comes to the rescue. And with the atmospheric drag, the velocity can be reduced considerably. And the ultimate final phase is using parachutes. One can have a soft touchdown. Whereas on the moon, there is no atmosphere.
Right.
So this entire operation has to be done with the propulsion modules. And they have to compensate for the gravitational pull of the moon. And then very programmed manner, it has to take it down.
Right.
So at the 2 kilometers, they went into a fine control mode where virtually the spacecraft will be floating and it will be placed very slowly on the surface of the moon.
Absolutely.
So if either any sensor or the computer or its algorithm or the thrusters misbehave, this kind of thing can happen. The data available was very meager. So it was not possible to pinpoint, but at the same time, all possible modes of failure has been analyzed by ISRO, and they have taken action to strengthen all those elements which are found to be deficient or weak. For example, the landing gear is now stronger one. The propulsion module is redesigned with a fine mode of control. And the sensors are being provided with redundancy, and the algorithm for the mission management also has been modified. After this, a large number of simulations have been carried out, and the confidence obtained in those simulations, especially simulating the non-nominal conditions, in case some anomaly takes place, how the mission can be recovered. So all this has been done, and hopefully that will lead to a 100% success on 23rd of August.
Absolutely indeed. And also, Dr. Nair, for the lay people who are watching this incredible journey that Chandrayaan-3 is presently on now, a lot of people think that the spacecraft takes off from the Earth, it travels straight up and then it goes to the moon. For a lay person who is watching us, tell us how this journey actually takes place. Because this rocket will first go into an elliptical orbit, and then it goes into ever larger elliptical orbits. And then it goes to a region where the gravitational pull of the Earth no longer covers it. And then the gravitational pull of the moon begins to attract this rocket system. Tell us in simple way as to how this actually works out.
Well, it is like this. Earth's gravitational field is the one which keeps the spacecraft around the Earth, and it is just like tying a stone and rotating at the end of the rope and then rotating it. So as long as the velocity is high, the rope will remain straight. Similarly, when we have the gravitational pull and the centrifugal force which is coming out of the spacecraft balances, it stays there. So initially, what is done is using this heavy lift launcher, it is placed into a 200 kilometers by 36,000 kilometer orbit. That means closest to Earth it is around 200 kilometers, and farthest point is around 36,000 kilometers. So that is a very respectable number. But from there to, of course, one can take a slingshot directly to the moon. But the uncertainties are very great, because once you leave the gravitational field of Earth, the influence of the moon, the Mars, and even sun becomes very predominant, and this influence coefficients has to be, basically, the once it gets out of the Earth's gravitational field, it will be subjected to the pull by the moon, the Mars, and other planets in the solar system, as well as sun. So this has to be calibrated. To what extent the trajectory is deviated, and of course there's a tracking station in the Bangalore which will keep track of these movements. So the propulsion modules fire step by step, maybe about 5 or 6 steps, and raise it to about 120,000 kilometers, and from there give you the escape velocity to travel towards moon. There, the velocity direction and the velocity magnitude are very critical. So then only it will reach closer to the moon. As it approaches the moon, the velocity is sufficiently high, and normally it will simply fly by. So at the precise moment, this propulsion module has to be operated again to reduce the velocity so that the moon can pull the entire spacecraft into its orbit. There again, initially it will be in elliptical orbit. Later, using the propulsion modules, step by step, it will be brought down to a 100-kilometer orbit. After it stabilizes at 100-kilometer orbit, the operation for descent maneuver will be initiated.
All right, very interesting. It's for the common people who are watching this, it's difficult to even wrap their heads around the kind of difficult calculations that will have to be done to put the rocket in the specific desired orbit so that it slowly reaches an area where it goes out of the Earth's gravitational field and then falls into the moon's gravitational field. But Dr. Lele, if I can bring you in on this, the technical aspects of this entire mission are tremendous. The place where we are trying to land in the south pole of the moon, it is said that there are these craters on the south pole of the moon where sunlight has not reached in millions of years. And that is what makes these craters in the south pole of the moon so interesting and so important for us to land upon.
Definitely. You see, as far as the entire moon mineralogy, entire moon geography, everything has been mapped not only by Indian missions, but by the missions which have been sent by United States of America and few other countries also. So now there is a reasonable understanding about how the moon surface looks like, what are the heights of these mountains, what are the depths of the craters over there. So ISRO has undertaken all these sorts of available information. And remember, they have already an orbiter which is moving out over there. So orbiter is continuously sending the imageries. So based on all that sort of information, now ISRO has identified the exact landing zone on the moon, where there will not be any issues associated either with high mountains or the craters also. So a lot amount of precaution has been taken already by understanding where exactly the system should land. And more importantly, as the mission starts progressing more towards the moon, then another imagery will be picked up from the orbiter. Some sort of a calibration will be done, and then only finally the decision will be taken on what landing zone the mission is to be landing.
Absolutely, indeed. And Dr. Nair, if I can give you the last word on this, it's not just in India where more than 1 billion people are watching. It is pretty much anyone who's interested in space and in space travel across the world is watching at this Chandrayaan-3 mission. And one of the reasons as to why India's space missions stand out for is the economy with which India is able to carry out these space missions successfully. Comparisons have been made about how India's space missions have often been cheaper than the budget of a Hollywood movie. So the question, sir, that I want to ask you is, how does ISRO do it?
Well, it goes to the credit of our founding father, like Dr. Vikram Sarabhai, who has really cultivated what is called ISRO culture. This has been nurtured by people like Professor Dhawan, Dr. Kalam, Professor U.R. Rao, and so on. And today we have got a very vibrant organization who they're very enthusiastic engineers, technicians, and others are there to take on the technology challenges, irrespective of the remuneration what they get. The remuneration what you pay to the ISRO team is maybe about 1/10 of what they may get in a similar job in a developed country. That's one factor. The second thing is ISRO's careful planning and execution. So they have ISRO has chalked out normally about a 10-year plan right from the beginning, and various elements of rockets, satellites, the application technology, etc., has been being developed continuously. And this development process makes use of what is already developed technology maximally.
Right.
Only the new elements are introduced. See, for example, the GSLV Mars 3, which has gone up, has got the propulsion modules derived from the PSLV.
Right. Absolutely, indeed. Thank you very much indeed to Dr. Nair and also to Dr. Lele for joining us on this broadcast and sharing your insights in this very important and crucial story. We'll be watching this very, very closely indeed, as India is, of course, embarking on a journey to script history to become only the 4th nation in the world to do a soft landing on the surface of the moon. Let's now shift our attention to the other big story that's been unfolding. In the month of June, a Chinese naval ship cut across the path of a US warship, nearly causing a collision. This was according to the Americans, who released a video of the interaction in the Taiwan Straits. In the month of May, a Chinese fighter jet flew directly in front of a US reconnaissance aircraft over the South China Sea, and this too was caught and shared on camera. Chinese aggression and belligerence is constantly growing, and India's land borders are already pretty hot, the Himalayan borders. Now, to prevent a similar situation in the maritime domain, the Indian Navy needs to be armed to the teeth and should be perpetually on guard, which it is. But the situation at this point of time is far from ideal. Now, the Navy's 30-year plan, ending in 2030, involves the building of 24 new submarines for India, including 18 conventional submarines and 6 nuclear-powered submarines. However, of the 18 conventional submarines, only about 6 of them have been completed or are close to completion. Additionally, for the 2 aircraft carriers, there is a shortage of fighter jets. The Navy has been using the MiG-29K fighter jets, and only about 40 of them at this moment are left. Now, with this being the backdrop, news of India planning to purchase marine versions of the Rafale fighter jets and more Scorpene-class submarines will give a certain boost to the deterrence capabilities of India against China in the Indian Ocean. The proposal is to purchase 26 Rafale M fighter jets, including 4 trainer aircraft. The Navy preferred the Rafale M fighter jets or the American F-18 Super Hornets. The Rafale M are capable of short takeoff, which is needed on aircraft carrier operations. They're also superior to the MiG-29K. Another merit is commonality with the Air Force's Rafale fleet. And this will, of course, fill a critical gap, as the development of an indigenous naval fighter jet will take at least another decade to accomplish. The proposal for submarines includes building 3 Scorpions at the Mazagaon dock, which earlier had a contract to make 6 submarines. The new vessels might be more advanced and also would feature DRDO's air-independent propulsion. And this deal assumes significance given the delay in Navy's Project 75 India for submarines with better specifications. The new deal will keep the production line working till Project 75I takes off. Now, the estimated value of the deals is about 90,000 crore rupees, but the final price could, of course, vary after the negotiations. Now, some argue that France is giving a new lease of life to its old technologies by pitching them to India, which sorely needs some top-notch weapons for the challenge that is growing in the Indian Ocean. But the fact remains that Paris's willingness to share technical know-how can, of course, be crucial to India developing indigenous technologies in the future. Now, France, remember, is a key and an old strategic partner of India. And the relationship has got almost no friction points that one can think of at this moment. Now, both nations, of course, value their strategic autonomy, independent foreign policies, and they also seek a multipolar world. The defense relationship is pretty robust and is set to get stronger. So take a look at the history of the India-France equation.
India and France's ties are a relationship of many firsts. They often get overshadowed by the glitz of India and America's partnership, or the nostalgia of Delhi and Moscow's history. But Paris has proven to be a more dependable ally of Delhi than many other nations, especially USA. After India conducted nuclear tests in 1974, the US refused to provide uranium for the Tarapur plant, but France and others stepped in. Then, after India's 1998 nuclear tests, America and other nations imposed sanctions, but French President Jacques Chirac supported India and opposed USA's action. When it comes to defense, France was the first to have a naval drill with India after the 1998 Pokhran tests. France has also provided weapons to India since the 1950s, including the Uragan, Mystère, Alizé, Alouette, Jaguar, Mirage, and Rafale. In the space domain, France shared Centaur and Viking rocket technology with India in the 1970s and also helped set up the Sriharikota launch site. In the fight against terrorism, France aided India's push to have the UN blacklist Masood Azhar after the 2019 Pulwama attack. The two nations have also been trying to get the UN to adopt the Comprehensive Convention on International Terrorism. On the international stage, France is a vocal supporter of India's permanent membership of the UN Security Council and helped India join groups which control the export of major weapon technologies. A big milestone in India and France's defense relationship came in 2018 when the two nations agreed to give each other access to their military facilities. This can be a big deterrent against China's aggression in the Indo-Pacific. Delhi and Paris are also working on satellite monitoring of the Indian Ocean region. But while China remains India's biggest challenge, France has been sending mixed signals on the Beijing question. After visiting China in April, France President Emmanuel Macron said that Europe should not get caught up in tensions between the USA and China, especially regarding Taiwan. This could also be in relation to one of France's main allies in the Indo-Pacific, Australia, cancelling a French submarine deal in favour of an American offer in 2021. While divisions in the West only help China, India is in a unique position to benefit as France looks for a reliable security partner in the Indo-Pacific. Also, with Delhi and Washington growing ever closer, India can also help bridge the gap in the West on the China problem.
All right, so this, of course, is what the situation is. Remember, India and France are getting closer. France appears to be more and more willing to sell defense hardware to India. And the reason why India is interested is because of the challenges back home in the domestic region, where the Chinese presence, not just along the Himalayan borders, but also in the Indian Ocean, is a sore pressure point. And it is for this reason why India, of course, is focusing to a very large extent on how to strengthen its naval capabilities. And to discuss all these aspects, we're being joined by retired Commodore C. Uday Bhaskar. He's also the Director of Society of Policy Studies. And we're also being joined by former Indian Ambassador to the United States and also to France, Ambassador Arun Singh, who's also joining us on this broadcast. But Commodore Bhaskar, let me begin by asking you this. The fact that the Indian Prime Minister, in his visit to France, the two key deals that have come forth are that of 26 Rafale M fighter jets being purchased and also of the 3 Scorpion-class submarines. Give us a sense of how this will boost India's naval capabilities.
The agreement for the Rafale M, which is the maritime marine variant, and the 3 Scorpion submarines would provide considerable infusion as far as the platform inventory levels of the Indian Navy are concerned. At the moment, the Indian Navy has a depletion as far as its underwater platform submarine is concerned. And we already have an agreement with France for the Scorpene submarines, which were built in Mandaron Docks, Mumbai. So these additional three submarines, if they come with the technology transfer clauses and that whole protocol, it would definitely enhance the Indian submarine inventory in a tactical sense. These agreements will take time. By the time these three submarines join the Indian Navy in an operational sense, it will be 3 to 4 years. But at least the process is starting.
Right, very interesting.
Similarly, as far as the fighter,
Right, go ahead, make your point, Komodo.
as far as the, I just finished this, the Indian aircraft carriers today, both of them, are operating a MiG-29, which is an interim arrangement. So the induction of the Rafale aircraft would also be tactically very significant in again enhancing the combat profile of the Indian Navy and India's trans-border military capability. So these two are significant in their own way, but in a tactical sense.
Absolutely, indeed. Do stay on with us. Let me bring in Ambassador Arun Singh, who is with us, and I'm told that we also have Ambassador Kanwal Sibal, the former Foreign Secretary, who is also joining us in this broadcast. But Ambassador Arun Singh, let me begin with you first. Now, this visit by the Indian Prime Minister to France is such a crucial one. It shows the growing strength of the India-French equation. Why is it that India and France are two nations that have so many points of concurrence and we have almost no friction points whatsoever?
You recall that when President Macron had come to India in 2018, and he had said publicly that France would like India to be its main strategic partner in this part of the world and would like to be India's main strategic partner in Europe. So I think that's the dimension from which they're approaching the relationship. There is a certain convergence of interest because both France and India want to maintain the autonomy of their decision making. And so in a multipolar context, when the main contestation is playing out between US, Russia and China, and India's effort is to strengthen relations with the US, sustain the relationship with Russia, and strengthen itself to deal with the challenge from China. So in that context, Europe will be an important pole that India will want to engage with. And in Europe, India's main strategic partnership is with France because Germany, which is the leading economic power, focuses more on intra-European processes or processes in the periphery of Europe. And with UK, although there's a strong diaspora relationship, we've had challenges because on India-Pakistan issues, they've tended to favor Pakistan. They have not taken effective action against Indian origin people in the diaspora there who carry out anti-India activities. So on things like nuclear energy, defense, space cooperation, our strongest partner has been France. So that's what's driving the relationship.
Absolutely, indeed. Now, Ambassador Sibal, if I can bring you in on this, the talk that's been around is that the United States wants to wean India away from the Russian military hardware that we've been purchasing from them for so many decades. But it appears to be France that seems to be leading the way from the Western Front, where France is more willing to sell some of these top-notch weapons to India.
Well, it's not as simple as that. For the Rafale, the C version, two contenders were the American F-18 and the Rafale.
Right.
And both apparently had been cleared by the Navy as acceptable. And it was for political masters to take the decision which aircraft we'll choose. So clearly the choice has been in favor of the Rafale. And it makes sense since we have 36 Rafales otherwise for our Air Force. Then having the naval version would mean a great deal of complementarity in terms of parts and servicing and everything else. So it's a rational decision, but it's the Americans who lost out. And in fact, the Americans and the French historically have been competing very hard in the Indian market. So the fact that the United States wants to wean India away from Russia on the defense side has nothing to do with India taking its own decisions with regard to its partners and choice of weapons. And in this case, we have chosen Rafale, as well as 3 additional Scorpene submarines, which in any case is an area in which the US is not a contender because they don't manufacture conventional submarines. They only manufacture nuclear submarines. And number two, with regard to the Scorpion, already there is an existing contract for 6.
Right.
So it's a continuation of that contract. And the fact that we chose then to go in for 6 meant that we were exploring other options other than the Russians, with whom we've had a long-standing relationship with regard to acquisition of submarines. So I think this is a decision which I wouldn't like to link either with our dilution of our ties with Russia or US pressure on us to dilute our ties with Russia. This is an independent decision based on what we feel is in our interest.
All right. Yeah. Do hold to that thought because I'll come back to you on that. But Komarov Bhaskar, if I can bring you in on this. Early in the month of April, the current naval chief said that there is a large presence of Chinese vessels in the Indian Ocean. There are estimates that at any given point of time, you could have nearly about 5 to 8 of these Chinese military naval vessels in the Indian Ocean. India, of course, does not accept, would not want the Chinese naval presence to increase. Are we taking the steps to, in some ways, to fight off the Chinese challenge, which is only likely to grow bigger in the coming years in the Indian Ocean region?
Well, both India and France have in the past identified an assertive China as a cause of concern, both in terms of the immediate security in the Indian Ocean, as also the sea lines of communication, and the larger issue of the global strategic order. This was stated by the French president, it has been stated by Prime Minister Narendra Modi, that both countries are committed to the equivalent of a free and open Indo-Pacific, where both rule of law and customary practice would be respected. And we should also remember that France is a resident Indian Ocean power because of the assets it has in the Réunion Islands and other assets in the Indian Ocean. So there is a shared concern, and my sense is that if India and France are able to agree on a long-term blueprint for the Indian Ocean, the very presence of two resident powers, India and France are resident powers. The United States is not a resident power in the same manner. It would send a very strong signal about stakeholders in the Indian Ocean for a common purpose.
Right.
But let me also add that China coming into the Indian Ocean cannot be objected to in technical terms because the Indian Ocean is part of the global common. But yes, if Chinese actions are inimical either to the prevailing global order or to India's own interests, then there would definitely be a case for
absolutely, indeed. But the Chinese are sending these naval ships, and they're sending them. A lot of these ships are dual-purpose ships on many occasions. A lot of these ships are also surveillance ships, which is the objection that India has been raising. Ambassador Arun Singh, another question that a lot of people have been pondering about, and this is something that's going to be talked about a lot. The reason why we only have points of convergence and very few friction points between India and France is because the relationship, by and large, is that of nations where essentially France is more and more willing to sell its weapons to India, which boosts the French defense industry. And that is the reason why they are doing this. Is that how you see these deals as well?
No, so I don't think we should see it only in that limited context, because aside from defense, France is also an important partner for India in civil nuclear energy. And there is discussion going on between India and the US for France to partner in setting up nuclear power plants here. And as you know, in Europe, the country which is the strongest in terms of civil nuclear technology is France. It's 50% of its energy generated from nuclear power. And also as a P5 member of the UN Security Council, France has been helpful to India from time to time. You spoke about the listing of Masood Azhar. But beyond that, when India had taken action in August 2019 on Article 370 in terms of our own constitutional processes, China had tried to move the UN Security Council for action against India. Mm-hmm. And it was the French who were in the lead, supported by the US, to block that action. And then in space, today we launched Chandrayaan 3 and you did a segment on that. And France has been a very important partner. 20 of our satellites have been launched from Kourou in the French Guiana. And France and India have done joint satellites. So it's a partnership with many dimensions. And if you saw Prime Minister in his own comments referred to the fact that Indian students in France will now be given permission to work for 5 years after they complete their studies. So there is an effort to strengthen the people-to-people, societal level contact. And one of the things that has strengthened relations, for example, between India and the US is a huge linkage with technical people, with students. So as more Indian students go to France, study there, work there, we will be able to also expand the business and economic relationship. So it's a multi-dimensional relationship, not just focusing on defense.
All right, very interesting. I think you've summed it up beautifully there. Ambassador Sibyl, we've been looking at the developments that have taken place. The Indian Prime Minister also visited the United States just a few weeks back. The United States has pulled out all stops to woo New Delhi. France appears to be doing the same. The world order is changing. Why is it that some of these big powers are making a beeline to try and woo India?
Well, there are many factors. One, of course, is that India's economic rise now is accepted as a potential market for Western economies. More, we are the fifth largest economy. This is constantly noted. Today I was hearing the commentary on the French TV channels while they were covering the parade. And it was said that, more than once that India is not the same India as they had thought earlier. It is the fifth largest economy. And they said on the very day we are having this parade, India has launched the Chandrayaan mission. So it has very strong space technology. So it's a country that has to be contended with. And then, of course, the demography of India, the fact that, and this has been noted in the French, I was reading some articles that have appeared on the occasion of Prime Minister's visit, that with its 1.4 point some billion population, the largest in the world, it is going to provide...
Let me just interject there. I get the point that India is the India of today is not the India of before. India's economy is robust and growing. But there's also this stream of thought that says the reason why the United States wants closer relations with India is because it wants to use India as a counterweight against China in its contain China policy. Is that what the United States and the other powers in the West are trying to do by closely aligning themselves with
you
India?
interrupted me. I was giving you a variety of reasons, and I was coming to the last reason, which is China. They realize that India is the only country that can, in Asia, that can stand up to China. Japan, South Korea, Philippines, they cannot do that. But if the United States and India join their hands and both have problems with China, then given India's stature in Asia and its potential, India can be a very valuable and almost indispensable partner in order to manage China's rise in Asia and present deterrence as a reality to Chinese adventurism. So that is very much there. But that may be the US view. And that may partly be our view. But it is not as if when we become closer to China, we have only, to United States, we have only China in mind. Far from it. In fact, our interest in the United States is basically technology, economy, investment, to be on the forefront of all these critical and emerging technologies. And that's the sense of what was agreed in the ICET, as well as, of course, strengthening our respective presence in the Indian Ocean.
Absolutely.
The exercises we do, the platform that they're giving us in order to manage the maritime space around us, underwater domain technologies. All these are aspects of a larger deterrence that is being built up with US and India in order to deter China. But for us, this is one important aspect, but far from the most important aspect of why we are becoming to the United States.
Absolutely, indeed. Do continue to stay on with us, Ambassador Sibyl. Meanwhile, I'm told that the French President Emmanuel Macron is in fact addressing the press there. The joint press briefing, we'll go to it in just a bit, but Before that, I am told that we have Mr. Alexis Paulin, who's a journalist and a co-founder of Le Monde Modern, who's joining us live from France. Ms. Paulin, this is a big moment in the India-French relationship, is it not? I mean, we saw the Indian Prime Minister and the Indian nation, of course, be wooed by the Americans just a few weeks back. And now what we're looking at is France, too, appears to have pulled out all stops. There are changes in the visa regime that it wants to bring about, and defense deals are being signed. Tell us what's driving the India-French equation here.
I think there is a long-term partnership between France and India on the defense side with, of course, the Rafale and submarine that have just been bought. But there was former Rafale fighters that have been bought as well. And France clearly see India as a key partner in the Indo-Pacific region and basically a geostrategic partner for the world. Emmanuel Macron has been very keen on trying to reach out to BRICS countries and the global south, I would say. He had a summit in Paris 2 weeks ago. He wanted to go to South Africa on the next BRICS meeting in August. And there is clearly now a sort of a race of woo country from the Western side. The old world is trying to be in pole position with the new world and big countries like India, China, and others that are clearly changing their games and are becoming stronger by the day.
Absolutely, indeed. Do hold on to that thought. Ambassador Sybil, if I can bring you in on this. You know, what I found very interesting in this entire meeting between the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and also the French President Emmanuel Macron is the warmth that the two leaders, of course, shared. You know, India now has this policy of strategic autonomy. It follows its own interests. But these big, old powers, if one could put it that way, are looking at India with certain interests that they've got in the Indian Ocean region, and also in terms of how they intend to position themselves and use in India in their relationship with Russia and China. How much of a tightrope walk do you think it is going to be, as India is looking for a very close relationship with the United States and France and other nations in the West, and also the fact that India has good relations with Moscow, and that relationship that New Delhi has with Beijing is a little fraught because of the border tensions?
Look, we just create this scenario as if we are the ones who have to do tightrope walking. Everybody has to do tightrope walking. The United States wants to improve relations with India, but at the same time, they want to maintain their relations with China, barring, of course, distancing themselves from certain strongholds that the Chinese have on critical and emerging technologies and this and that. Look at the Janet Yellen's visit to China. Look at the manner in which Blinken wants to continue to engage China and is pleading for a dialogue between the armed forces of the two countries. They don't want to break their relationship with China, but they want to build a relationship with India. Similarly, France, when Macron went to China, he made certain statements which were not liked by the Americans at all when he said that they don't want to become a vassal state.
All right, so very interesting there. Thank you very much indeed, Ambassador Sybil, for joining us on this broadcast. And also thank you very much indeed to Ambassador Arun Singh and Commodore Uday Bhaskar, and also to our guest from France, Alexis Paulin, for joining us all the way from Paris. This of course, is a big moment in the India-France relationship. The Indian Prime Minister was there for 2 long days, and it's been such a productive and a fruitful and an important relationship between the two nations. And the India-France equation can only get stronger from here. And with that, it's also a wrap on this edition of the India Story. Stay tuned.